You know the time when you peek into your wallet and notice that you've got no money left, especially at the end of the month? Well, that's what the government of India goes through almost every year, except that they have a term for it. It's called fiscal deficit. And that's the concept I'll try to explain to you in this video. Also, get you to understand what exactly are the implications of this fiscal deficit number, which the government does announce on every budget day. So, as we know, the government has two components. One is where it spends money, the other from where it earns money. So when it comes to expenditure, the government spends money on making our lives better. So for example, on the metro, on infrastructure, construction, subsidies, so on and so forth. These essentially are what we call as fiscal expenditures. Consider them as money just not going to come back to the government. Yes, they do collect toll and they collect, other kind of fees for when they construct a road, but largely this is money that's not going to come back to the government. It's somewhat like when you go online shopping, you purchase some products, but of course it's an expenditure. It's not like you're building a capital asset. So that's your fiscal expenditure. Fiscal revenue is essentially the money that the government earns when you pay GST, when you pay taxes, when you even pay fines for when you break a red signal. All of that is considered as revenue for the government and is called as fiscal revenue. Now, when the fiscal expenditure exceeds the fiscal revenue in a year, we call it as fiscal deficit. Around the world, the fiscal deficit is usually judged as a parameter compared to the GDP. So the fiscal deficit will always be a percentage of the GDP. It could be high for some countries like India, could be lower for some of the other countries like maybe a China, which by the way has been having a fiscal surplus. But what exactly does such a macro level of fiscal deficit mean for people like you and me? Now, Macroeconomics 101 teaches us that whenever expenditure is higher than revenue, essentially when we are in a fiscal deficit, the government of course is spending more money in the economy. That usually has inflationary pressure. So ordinarily, what you would notice is that things are getting a bit more expensive. When that happens, the RBI then tends to hike interest rates. So let's say if you are, paying down your EMI, your home loan EMIs, if this fiscal deficit number is very high, it has inflationary pressures. It causes the yields as well in the market to rise, and sometimes that has an impact on your EMIs. It comes with a lag, but it does tend to have an impact on your EMI bill in the long term. It tends to go up. But if the fiscal deficit is well controlled and well managed, then it remains stable. But this time around, of course, because of the crisis that COVID-19 has thrown us in, all of these numbers will go awry. Firstly, it's obviously expected that the fiscal deficit number will be very, very large because the government had to spend a lot of money, to provide us with the facilities that we need. It's going to be spending a lot of money on vaccine distribution as well. And on the other hand, revenues have fallen quite a bit. When businesses were shut, there was obviously no GST payment. This time around, incomes as well have fallen. So direct tax collection as well will be low. So the fiscal deficit number is expected to be quite high. The government pre-corona had placed the fiscal deficit target at around 3.5% of the GDP for FY21. Now we have some estimates that are putting that number to 7.5%. For example, ICRA believes that could be the number. And then you also have Barclays, which believes that the fiscal deficit could be as high as 14% of the GDP in FY21. Now, before that spooks you, let me tell our viewers that there's not necessarily a reason that this high fiscal deficit number for FY21 will automatically lead to a rise in inflation or rise in interest, like I mentioned, because the RBI knows, the government knows, we know that this is an extraordinary situation that we are in the midst of. In fact, as opposed to hiking interest rates, the RBI is going to be in this prolonged period of a pause in interest rates. So it's an exceptional, situation that we are in, and that's the reason why this fiscal deficit number may not directly impact us and the environment around us, but nevertheless do watch out for it. And not just that, do watch out for also what will be the target that Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will keep for FY22, because largely that's when things will start normalizing, and the RBI as well will look at things more holistically and really see whether inflation is going to be a niggling factor.